April 9, 2019, the Himalayas.
An Indian Army expedition is on a remote mountain pass on the border of Nepal and China when they make a bizarre discovery: massive footprints in the snow that don't match any known animal on Earth.
The footprints that they find don't look human in any way, shape, or form.
The footprints measure about 32 inches long by 15 inches wide, which is significantly beyond what any normal human footprint should look like.
They do what any of us would do nowadays, which is they tweet it. They take pictures. They post them online from the official Indian Army Twitter account.
They send a tweet to the world saying, "We have found the Yeti," and the scientific world and the cryptozoological world explodes. Tales of the Yeti, this mythical beast from the high mountains of Asia and Siberia, have existed for thousands of years, and what they describe it as is a large, towering, fanged, bipedal creature that is covered from toe to head in hair, and it has the features of both an ape and a human. The first recorded sighting of the Yeti occurs in the 4th century BCE. In 326 BC, as Alexander is attempting to conquer the Himalayas, he hears these stories about this wild man of the snows, and so he sends members of his army out to go and see if they can find this beast, but to no avail. No monster or wild man is ever caught. The origins of the Yeti, where it actually begins, is unknown, but we can go back to the 7th century CE, where if you look at Tibetan folklore, they describe a wild, hairy man of the mountains, originally known as the glacier beast. And if you look at Tibetan religious beliefs, they see the Yeti as actually a god of the forest and all the animals that live within it. There's no consistent agreement about the nature of this creature.
Everyone pretty much agrees that it exists.
Some cultures feature him as feral, aggressive, and dangerous, while others describe it as shy or even mischievous. There are ideas and traditional beliefs that the Yeti is a spiritual protector, that it's actually protecting the sacred mountain peaks, and that if humans encroach on those spaces, they get killed on sight.
The Yeti first captures the modern world's imagination at the turn of the 20th century.
In 1899, Scottish explorer Lawrence Waddell publishes his book, Among the Himalayas, and in it, he talks about an excursion that he's going on while in the Himalayan mountains. He recounts a story of being at 17,000 feet and coming across a series of tracks.
He looks to his guides and asks, "What is this?"
They say, "This is the wild, hairy man of the eternal snows." In 1921, the explorer Charles Howard Berry is up around 20,000 feet, and he and his guides also see the same thing, these giant footprints in the snow.
So he pulls out his binoculars and scans the horizon, and he actually sees something.
He sees off in the distance, against the snow, this giant lumbering creature.
Now, it's far away. He can't see a lot of details of it, but it's really clearly there, stark against the snow. When he asks his guides, "Okay, so what am I seeing here?" they also have an answer for him. The wild man of the snows. They call it the Mitoconmi. When Howard Berry is later interviewed by a journalist about his experience in the Himalayas, he mentions Mitoconmi. The reporter mistakenly substitutes the word mito, which means wild, with mek, which means filthy. A little journalistic embellishment. A little playing around with some language. And because of this, the Yeti now gains a brand new title and becomes known henceforth as the Abominable Snowman. The idea that there is some undiscovered, giant, bipedal creature living in the mountains of Asia and Siberia stokes the fires of the scientific community, and it basically begins this wonderful charge into the mountains to discover this. And who's going to discover it first?
The Himalayan mountain range stretches for more than 1,500 miles across 5 countries. Any one of these countries could hold the answer that finally solves the mystery of the Yeti.
But some researchers believe that the most compelling clues come from China. Now, you have to understand that China is an incredibly large country, and all the different mountainous regions start to yield their own kind of legend about the wild men. Over the years, these Chinese legends begin to coalesce and form one story, one mythology, one legend, one bit of folklore. And this legendary creature now becomes known as the Yeren. One of the most well-known stories is that these wild men, if you come across one, will be so filled with joy at coming upon you that they will bear hug you and pass out from excitement. You'll fall to the ground with them because they're so strong, you can't get away. And then, when it wakes up, it eats you. However, some researchers speculate that the Yeren might not entirely be based in myth and folklore, and that, in fact, it might be based on a species that existed on the planet in reality, a long, long time ago.
One theory that still intrigues researchers to this day first emerges back in 1935, thanks to a Dutch anthropologist with an interest in the Far East. Ralph von Koenigswald is in Hong Kong on a research trip, and during the day, he stumbles into a medicine shop. While he is there, he sees, in a jar, a giant molar labeled dragon's tooth. The reason they're selling this tooth is because it's purported that if you grind it up and ingest it, it's supposed to give you magical powers. But von Koenigswald looks at that tooth and says, "I know this tooth. I know where this comes from. This is a primate tooth." So he buys the tooth, takes it back, and does research on it. Through his research, he identifies it as an early hominid species from the human family tree. According to him, this particular species would have been far back enough in the human family tree that it would have been completely covered in hair except for its face and hands, kind of like a chimpanzee, except this chimpanzee would have been about 10 feet tall and weighed upwards of 1,200 pounds. Based on the primate's immense size, the species is named Gigantopithecus. Fossil discoveries over the last 8 or 9 decades show that Gigantopithecus lived in the area that is now China and Tibet over 2 million years ago. Most scientists agree that Gigantopithecus went extinct about 250,000 years ago. But there are those who believe that, because of the remoteness of the region and their ability to adapt, they have actually thrived in the high-altitude environments of China, Tibet, Bhutan, and Siberia. In the 1950s, a British zoologist examines Shipton's photographs and creates a plaster mold of what he thinks that footprint would have looked like. After he examines this plaster cast, he determines that this could not have been made by a bear. It had to be made by a very large bipedal hominid, and he determines that it is likely Gigantopithecus. Other researchers soon voiced their support for the Gigantopithecus theory. In 1977, American anthropologist Grover Krantz believes that Gigantopithecus could have survived in a small tribe in the remote areas of the Himalayas and, therefore, could be the basis for what the modern Yeti is. It's possible there are even more layers to the origin story of this ancient primate. Researchers and scientists have found very, very few fossils when it comes to Gigantopithecus, and because of that, it's very hard to suggest that there's a tribe of Gigantopithecus that hangs out in the mountains and evolved into a new species that became the basis for the Yeti. Until we have something like a complete skeleton, it will remain in the realm of speculation. Further research into the Yeti legend suggests that perhaps the Yeti is an even closer relative to humans than we had previously thought.